Metamorphoses, Book the 14th, by Ovid, translated by Sir Samuel Garth, John Dryden, et al. The transformation of Scylla. Now Glaucus, with a lover's haste, bounds o'er the swelling waves, and seeks the Latian shore. Messena, Rhegium, and the barren coast of flaming Aetna to his sight are lost. At length he gains the Tyrrhene seas, and views the hills where baneful philters Circe brews. Monsters in various forms around her press, as thus the god salutes the sorceress. O Circe, be indulgent to my grief, and give a lovesick deity relief. Too well the mighty power of plants I know, to those my figure and new fate I owe. Against Messina, on the Ocean coast, I, Scylla, viewed, and from that hour was lost. In tenderest sounds I sued, but still the fair was deaf to vows and pitiless to prayer. If numbers can avail, exert their power, or energy of plants, if plants have more. I ask no cure, but let the virgin pine with dying pangs or agonies, like mine. No longer Circe could flame her disguise, but to the suppliant god marine replies, when maids are coy, have manlier aims in view. Leave those that fly, but those that like, pursue. If love can be by kind compliance won, see at your feet the daughter of the sun. Sooner, said Glaucus, shall the ash remove from mountains, and the swelling surges love, or humble seaweed to the hills repair, ere I think any but my Scylla fair. Straight Circe reddens with a guilty shame, and vows revenge for her rejected flame. Fierce liking oft a spite as fierce creates, for love refused without aversion hates. To hurt her hapless rival she proceeds, and by the fall of Scylla Glaucus bleeds. Some fascinating beverage now she brews, composed of deadly drugs and baneful juice. At Rhegium she arrives, the ocean braves, and treads with unwet feet the boiling waves. Upon the beach a winding bay there lies, sheltered from seas and shaded from the skies. This station Scylla chose, a soft retreat from chilling winds and raging Cancer's heat. The vengeful sorceress visits this recess. Her charm infuses and infects the place. Soon, as the nymph wades in, her nether parts turn into dogs. Then at herself she starts. A ghastly horror in her eyes appears, but yet she knows not who it is she fears. In vain she offers from herself to run, and drags about her what she strives to shun. Oppressed with grief, the pitying god appears, and swells the rising surges with his tears. From the detested sorceress he flies, her art reviles and her address denies, whilst hapless Scylla, changed to rocks, decrees destruction to those barks that beat the seas. Here bulged the pride of famed Ulysses' fleet, but good Aeneas 'scaped the fate he met. As to the Latian shore the Trojan stood, and cut with well-timed oars the foaming flood. He weathered fell Charybdis, but ere long the skies were darkened, and the tempest strong. Then to the Libyan coast he stretches o'er, and makes at length the Carthaginian shore. Here Dido, with an hospitable care, into her heart receives the wanderer. From her kind arms the ungrateful hero flies. The injured queen looks on with dying eyes. Then to her folly falls a sacrifice. Aeneas now sets sail, and plying gains fair Eryx, where his friend Acetus reigns. First to his sire does funeral rites decree, then gives the signal next, and stands to sea. Outruns the islands where volcanoes roar, gets clear of sirens and their faithless shore, but looses Palnurus in the way. Then makes Inarome and Procita. The galleys now by Pithecusa pass. The name is from the natives of the place. The father of the gods, detesting lies, oft with abhorrence heard their perjuries. The abandoned race, transformed to beasts, began to mimic the impertinence of man. Flat-nosed and furrowed, with grimace they grin, and look to what they were, too near akin. Merry and make and busy to no end, this moment they divert, the next offend. So much this species of their past retains, though lost the language, yet the noise remains. Now, on his right, he leaves Parthenope. His left, Mycenus, jutting in the sea, arrives at Cuma, and with awe surveyed the grotto of the venerable maid, begs leave through black Avernus to retire, and view the much-loved manes of his sire. Straight the divining virgin raised her eyes, and foaming with a holy rage replies, O thou whose worth thy wondrous works proclaim, the flames thy piety, the world thy fame. Though great be thy request, yet shalt thou see the Elysian fields, the infernal monarchy. Thy parent shade, this arm thy steps shall guide, to suppliant virtue nothing is denied. She spoke, and pointing to the golden bow, which in the Avernian grove refulgent grew, seize that, she bids. He listens to the maid, then views the mournful mansions of the dead, the shade of great Anchises, and the place by fates determined to the Trojan race. As back to upper light the hero came, he thus salutes the visionary dame. Oh, whether some propitious deity, or loved by those bright rulers of the sky, with grateful incense I shall style you one, and deem no godhead greater than your own. 'Twas you restored me from the realms of night, and gave me to behold the fields of light, to feel the breezes of congenial air, and nature's blessed benevolence to share. I am no deity, replied the dame, but mortal, and religious rites disclaim. Yet had avoided death's tyrannic sway, had I consented to the god of day. With promises he sought my love, she said. Have you all wish? My fair Cumean maid, I pause, then pointing to a heap of sand, for every grain to live a year demand. But unmindful of the effect of time, forgot to covenant for youth and prime. The smiling bloom I boasted once is gone, and feeble age with lagging limbs creeps on. 7 centuries have I lived, 3 more fulfill the period of the years to finish still. Who think that Phoebus, dressed in youth divine, had once believed his lustre less than mine? This withered frame, so fates have willed, shall waste to nothing, but prophetic words at last. The Sibyl mounting now from nether skies, and the famed Ilian priest at Cuma rise. He sailed, and near the place to anchor came, since called Caheta from his nurse's name. Here did the luckless Macarius, a friend to wise Ulysses, his long labours end. Here, wandering, Achaemenides he meets, and sudden, thus, his late associate greets. Whence came you here, O friend, and whither bound? All gave you lost on far Cyclopean ground. A Greeks at last aboard a Trojan found. Thus, Achaemenides with thanks I name, Aeneas, and his piety proclaim. I scaped the Cyclops through the hero's aid, else in his maw my mangled limbs had laid. When first your navy under sail he found, he raved till Aetna laboured with the sound. Raging, he stalked along the mountain side, and vented clouds of breath at every stride. His staff a mountain ash, and in the clouds, oft as he walks, his grisly front he shrouds. Eyeless, he groped about with vengeful haste, and justled promontories as he passed. Then heaved a rock's high summit to the main, and bellowed like some bursting hurricane. Oh, could I seize Ulysses in his flight, how unlamented were my loss of sight! These jaws should piecemeal tear each panting vein, grind every crackling bone, and pound his brain. As thus he raved, my joints with horror shook, the tide of blood my chilling heart forsook. I saw him once disgorge huge morsels raw of wretches undigested in his maw. From the pale breathless trunks whole limbs he tore, his beard all clotted with overflowing gore. My anxious hours I passed in caves, my food was forest fruits and wildings of the wood. At length a sail I wafted, and aboard my fortune found an hospitable lord. Now, in return, your own adventures tell, and what, since first you put to sea, befell. Then Macarius there reigned a prince of fame, o'er Tuscan seas, and Aeolus his name. A largesse to Ulysses he consigned, and in a steer's tough hide enclosed a wind. 9 days before the swelling gale we ran, the 10th to make the meeting land began, when now the merry mariners to find imagined wealth within the bag unbind. Forthwith outrushed a gust, which backwards bore our galleys to the Lystrigionian shore, whose crown Antiphates the tyrant wore. Some few commissioned were with speed to treat. We to his court repair, his guards we meet. 2, friendly flight preserved, the 3rd was doomed to be by those cursed cannibals consumed. Inhumanly our hapless friends they treat, our men they murder, and destroy our fleet. In time the wise Ulysses bore away, and dropped his anchor in yon faithless bay. The thoughts of perils past we still retain, and fear to land till lots appoint the men. Pelides true, Elpenor given to wine, Eurylochus myself the lots assign, designed for dangers and resolved to dare. To Circe's fatal palace we repair. Before the spacious font a herd we find of beasts, the fiercest of the savage kind. Our trembling steps with blandishments they meet, and fawn unlike their species at our feet. Within, upon a sumptuous throne of state, on golden columns raised, the enchantress sate. Rich was her robe, and amiable her mien, her aspect awful, and she looked a queen. Her maids not mind the loom nor household care, nor wage in needlework a Scythian war, but cull in canisters disastrous flowers, and plants from haunted heaths and fairy bowers, with brazen sickles reaped at planetary hours. Each dose the goddess weighs with watchful eye, so nice her art in impious pharmacy. Entering, she greets us with a gracious look, and airs that future amity bespoke. Her ready nymphs serve up a rich repast. The bowl she dashes first, then gives to taste. Quick to our own undoing we comply. Her power we prove, and show the sorcery. Soon, in a length of face, our head extends, our chine stiff bristles bears, and forward bends. A breath of brawn new burnishes our neck. Anon we grunt as we begin to speak. Alone, Eurylochus refused to taste, nor to a beast obscene the man debased. Hither Ulysses hastes, so fate's command, and bears the powerful moly in his hand, unsheathes his scimitar, assaults the dame, preserves his species, and remains the same. The nuptial rite this outrage straight attains. The dower desired his transfigured friends. The incantation backward she repeats, inverts her rod, and what she did defeats. Now our skin grows smooth, our shape upright. Our arms stretch up, our cloven feet unite. With tears our weeping general we embrace, hang on his neck, and melt upon his face. 12 silver moons in Circe's court we stay, whilst there they waste the unwilling hours away. 'Twas here I spied a youth in Parian stone, his head a pecker bore, the cause unknown to passengers, a nymph of Circe's train. The mystery thus attempted to explain. Picus, who once the Ozonian scepter held, could rein the steed and feel him for the field. So like he was to see what you see, that still we doubt of real or the sculptor's skill. The grace in the finished piece you find are but the copy of his fairer mind. 4 lustres scarce the royal youth could name, till every lovesick nymph confessed a flame. Oft for his love the mountain dryads sued, and every silver sister of the flood, those of Numicus, Albula, and those where Almo creeps, leaps, and hasty Nar o'erflows, where sedgy Anio glides through smiling meads, where shady Farfar rustles in the reeds, and those that love the lakes in homage owe to the chaste goddess of the silver bow. In vain each nymph her brightest charms put on, his heart no sovereign would obey but one. She, whom Venilia on Mount Palatine to Janus bore, the fairest of her line, nor did her face alone her charms confess. Her voice was ravishing, and pleased no less, whene'er she sung, so melting were her strains, the flocks unfed seemed listening on the plains. The rivers would stand still, the cedars bend, and birds neglect their pinions to attend. The savage kind in forest wilds grow tame, and Canaans, from her heavenly voice, her name. Hymen had now in some ill-fated hour their hands united, as their hearts before, whilst their soft moments in delights they waste, and each new day was dearer than the past. Picus would sometimes o'er the forests rove, and mingle sports with intervals of love. It chanced as once the foaming boar he chased, his jewels sparkling on his Tyrian vest. Lascivious Circe well the youth surveyed, as simpling on the flowery hills she strayed. Her wishing eyes their silent message tell, as from her lap the verdant mischief fell. As she attempts at words, his courser springs o'er hills and lawns, and even a wish outwings. Thou shalt not scape me so, pronounced the dame, if plants have powers and spells be not a name. She said, and forthwith formed a boar of air, that sought the covert with dissembled fear. Swift to the thicket Picus wings his way, on foot to chase the visionary prey. Now she invokes the daughters of the night, does noxious juices smear and charms recite, such as can veil the moon's more feeble fire, or shade the golden lustre of her sire. In filthy fogs she hides the cheerful noon, the guarded distance, and the youth alone. By those fair eyes, she cries, and every grace that finish all the wonders of your face. Oh, I conjure thee, hear a queen complain, nor let the sun's soft lineage sue in vain. Whoe'er thou art, replied the king, forbear, none can my passion with my Canaan share. She first my every tender wish possessed, and found the soft approaches to my breast. In nuptials blest each loose desire we shun, nor time can end what innocence begun. Think not, she cried, to saunter out a life of form with that domestic drudge a wife. My just revenge, dull fool, ere long shall show what ills we women, if refused, can do. Think me a woman and a lover too. From dear successful spite we hope for ease, nor fail to punish where we fail to please. Now twice to the east she turns, as oft to west, thrice waves her wand, as oft a charm expressed. On the lost youth her magic power she tries. Aloft he springs, and wonders how he flies. On painted plumes the woods he seeks, and still the monarch oak he pierces with his bill. Thus changed, no more o'er Latian lands he reigns. Of Picus nothing but the name remains. The winds from drizzling damps now purge the air. The mist subsides, the settling skies are fair. The court their sovereign seek with arms in hand. They threaten Circe, and their lord demand. Quick she invokes the spirits of the air, and 12 elves that on dun wings repair to charnels, the unhallowed sepulchre. Now, strange to tell, the plants sweat drops of blood. The trees are tossed from forests where they stood. Blue serpents o'er the tainted herbage slide. Pale glaring spectres on the ether ride. Dogs howl, earth yawns, rent rocks forsake their beds, and from their quarries heave their stubborn heads. The sad spectators, stiffened with their fears, she sees, and sudden every limb she smears. Then each of savage beasts the figure bears. The sun did now to western waves retire, in tides to temper his bright world of fire. Canaan's laments her royal husband's stay. Ill suits fond love with absence or delay. Where she commands, her ready people run. She wills, retracts, beads, and forbids anon. Restless in mind and dying with despair, her breast she beats and tears her flowing hair. 6 days and nights she wanders on, as chance directs, without or sleep or sustenance. Tiber at last beholds the weeping fair, her feeble limbs no more the mourner bear. Stretched on his banks, she to the flood complains, and faintly tunes her voice to dying strains. The sickening swan thus hangs her silver wings, and as she droops, her elegy she sings. Ere long, sad Canaan's wastes to air, whilst fame the place still honours with her hapless name. Here did the tender tale of Picus cease. Above, believe the wonder, I confess. Again we sail, but more disasters meet, foretold by Circe to our suffering fleet. Myself, unable further woes to bear, declined the voyage, and am refuged here. Thus Macarius, now with a pious aim, had good Aeneas raised a funeral flame in honour of his hoary nurse's name. Her epitaph he fixed, and setting sail, Caheta left, and catched at every gale. He steered at distance from the faithless shore, where the false goddess reigns with fatal power, and sought those grateful groves that shade the plain, where Tiber rues majestic to the main, and fattens as he runs the fair campaign. His kindred gods the hero's wishes crown with fair Lavinia and Latinus' throne, but not without a war the prize he won. Drawn up in bright array, the battle stands. Turnus with arms his promised wife demands. Etrurians, Latines, equal fortune share, and doubtful long appears the face of war. Both powers from neighbouring princes seek supplies, and embassies appoint for new allies. Aeneas, for relief, Evander moves. His quarrel he asserts, his cause approves. The bold Rutulians with an equal speed sage Vendes dispatch to Diomed. The king, late griefs revolving in his mind, these reasons for neutrality assigned. Shall I, of one poor dodal town possessed, my people thin, my wretched country waste, an exiled prince, and on a shaking throne, or risk my patron subjects or my own? You'll grieve the harshness of our hap to hear, nor can I tell the tale without a tear. After famed Ilium was by Argives won, and flames had finished what the sword begun, Pallas, incensed, pursued us to the main, in vengeance of her violated fane. Alone, Oileus forced the Trojan maid, yet all were punished for the brutal deed. A storm begins, the raging waves run high, the clouds look heavy, and benight the sky red sheets of lightning o'er the seas are spread. Our tackling yield, and wrecks at last succeed. 'Tis tedious our disastrous state to tell, even Priam would have pitied what befell, yet Pallas saved me from the swallowing main. At home, new wrongs to meet, as fates ordain. Chased from my country, I once more repeat, all suffering seas could give, or war complete. For Venus, mindful of her wound, decreed still new calamities should past succeed. Agmon, impatient through successive ills, with fury love's bright goddess thus reviles. These plaques in spite to Diomed are sent. The crime is his, but ours the punishment. Let each, my friends, her puny spleen despise, and dare that haughty harlot of the skies. The rest of Agmon's insolence complain, and of irreverence the wretch reign. About to answer, his blaspheming throat contracts, and shrieks in some disdainful note. To his new skin a fleece of feather clings, hides his late arms and lengthens into wings. The lower features of his face extend, warp into horn, and in a beak descend. Some more experience Agmon's destiny, and wheeling in the air like swans they fly. These thin remains to Dionysus' realms I bring, and here I reign, a poor, precarious king. Thus Diomedes Venalus withdraws, unsped, the service of the common cause. Puteoli he passes unsurveyed, a cave long honored for its awful shade. Here trembling reeds exclude the piercing ray. Here streams in gentle falls through windings stray. And with a passing breath cool zephyrs play. The Gothard god frequents the silent place. At once the wood nymphs of the sylvan race, till Apollos, with a dishonest air and gross behavior, banished thence the fair. The bold buffoon, whenever they tread the green, their motion mimics, but with jest obscene. Loose language oft he utters, but ere long a bark and filmy network binds his tongue. Thus changed a base wild olive, he remains. The shrub the coarseness of the clown retains. Meanwhile, the Latians all their power prepare 'gainst fortune and the foe to push the war. With Phrygian blood the floating fields they stain, but, short of succours, still contend in vain. Turnus remarks the Trojan fleet ill-manned, unguarded, and at anchor near the stand. He thought, and straight a lighted brand he bore, and fire invades what 'scaped the waves before. The billows from the kindling prow retire, pitch, Rossin, searward, on red wings aspire, and Vulcan on the seas exerts his tribute of fire. This, when the mother of the gods beheld, her towery crown she shook and stood revealed. Her brindled lions reigned unveiled her head, and hovering o'er her favourite fleet, she said, "Cease, Turnus, and the heavenly powers respect, nor dare to violate what I protect. These galleys once fair trees on Ida stood, and gave their shade to each descending god. Nor shall consume irrevocable fate allots their being no determined date. Straight peals of thunder heaven-high arches rend, the hailstones leap, the showers in spouts descend, the winds with widened throats the signal give, the cables break, the smoking vessels drive, now wondrous, as they beat the foaming flood. The timber softens into flesh and blood. The yards and oars new arms and legs design, a trunk the hull, the slender keel a spine, the prow a female face, and by degrees the galleys rise green daughters of the seas. Sometimes on coral beds they sit in state, or wanton on the waves they feared of late. The barks that beat the seas are still their care, themselves remembering what of late they were. To save a Trojan sail in throngs they press, but smile to see Alcinous in distress. Unable were those wonders to deter the Latines from their unsuccessful war. Both sides for doubtful victory contend, and on their courage and their gods depend. Nor bright Lavinia nor Latinius's crown warm their great soul to war like fair renown. Venus at last beholds her godlike son, triumphant, and the field of battle won. Brave Turnus slain, strong Ardea but a name, and buried in fierce deluges of flame. Her towers, that boasted once a sovereign sway, the fate of fancied grandeur now betray. A famished heron from the ashes springs, and beats the ruin with disastrous wings. Calamities of towns distressed she feigns, and oft with woeful shrieks of war complains. Now had Aeneas, as ordained by fate, survived the period of Saturnia's hate, and by a sure irrevocable doom fixed the immortal majesty of Rome. Fit for the station of his kindred stars, his mother goddess thus her suit prefers. Almighty arbiter, whose powerful nod shakes distant earth, and bows our own abode, to thy great progeny indulgent be, and rank the goddess born a deity. Already has he viewed with mortal eyes thy brother's kingdoms of the nether skies, for with a conclave of the Godhead meets, where Juno in the shining senate sits. Remorse for past revenge the goddess feels. Then thundering Jove the almighty mandate seals, allots the prince of his celestial line an apotheosis and rites divine. The crystal mansions echo with applause, and with her graces love's bright queen withdraws, shoots in a blaze of light along the skies, and borne by turtles to Laurentum flies, alights, where through the reeds Numicius strays, and to the seas his watery tribute pays. The god she supplicates to wash away the parts more gross and subject to decay, and cleanse the goddess born from seminal allay. The horned flood with glad attention stands, then bids his streams obey their sire's commands, his better parts by lustral waves refined, more pure and nearer to ethereal mind. With gums of fragrant scent the goddess strews, and on his features breathes ambrosial dews. Thus deified, new honors Rome decrees, shrines, festivals, and styles him in dieges. Ascanius now the Latian sceptre sways, the Alban nation Silvius next obeys, the young Latinus next, and Alba came, the grace and guardian of the Alban name. Then Epitus, then gentle Capys reigned, then Capitus the regal power sustained, next he who perished on the Tuscan flood, and honored with his name the river god. Now haughty Remulus begun his reign, who fell by thunder he aspired to fame. Meek Acrota succeeded to the crown, from peace endeavouring more than arms renown. To Avertinius well resigned his throne. The mount on which he ruled preserves his name, and Procus wore the regal diadem. A hamadryad flourished in these days, her name Pomona, from her woodland race. In garden culture none could so excel, or form the pliant souls of plants so well, or to the fruit more generous flavors lend, or teach the trees with nobler loads to bend. The nymph frequented not the flattering stream, nor meads the subject of a virgin's dream, but to such joys her nursery did prefer, alone to tend her vegetable care. A pruning hook she carried in her hand, and taught the stragglers to obey command, lest the licentious and unthrifty beau the too indulgent parent should undo. She shows how stocks invite to their embrace a graft, and naturalize a foreign race, to mend the salvage taint, and in its stead adopt new nature and a nobler breed. Now hourly she observes her growing care, and guards their nonage from the bleaker air. With flowing droughts her thirsty family long had she labored to continue free, from chains of love and nuptial tyranny. And in her orchard small extent immured, her vowed virginity she still secured, oft with loose span and all the lustful train of satyrs dimmed her innocence in vain. Silenus, that old dotard, owned a flame, and he that frights the thieves with stratagem of sword and something else too gross to name. Vertumnus too pursued the maid no less, but with his rivals shared a like success. To gain access 1,000 ways he tries, oft in the hind the lover would disguise. The heedless lout comes shambling on and seems just sweating from the labor of his teams. Then from the harvest off the mimic swain seems bending with a load of bearded grain. Sometimes a dresser of the vine he feigns, and lawless tendrils to their bounds restrains. Sometimes his sword a soldier shows, his rod an angler still. So various is the god. Now in a forehead cloth some chrome he seems, a staff supplying the defect of limbs. Admittance thus he gains, admires the storer of fairest fruit, the fair possessor more. Then greets her with a kiss. The unpractised dame admired a grand dame, kissed with such a flame. Now, seated by her, he beholds a vine around an elm in amorous foldings twine. If that fair elm, he cried, alone should stand, no grapes would glow with gold and tempt the hand. Or if that vine without her elm should grow, 'twould creep a poor neglected shrub below. Be then, fair nymph, by these examples led, nor shun for fancied fears the nuptial bed. Not she for whom the apotheosis took arms, nor Sparta's queen could boast such heavenly charms. And if you would on woman's faith rely, none can your choice direct so well as I. This old so much Pomona I adore, scarce as the bright Vertumnus love her more. 'Tis your fair self alone his breast inspires with softest wishes and unsoiled desires. Then fly all vulgar followers, and prove the god of seasons only worth your love. On my assurance well you may repose. Vertumnus scarce Vertumnus better knows. True to his choice, all looser flames he flies, nor for new faces fashionably dies. The charms of youth and every smiling grace bloom in his features, and the god confess. Besides, he puts on every shape at ease, but those the most, the best, Pomona please. Still, to oblige her is her lover's aim. Their likings and aversions are the same. Nor the fair fruit your burthened branches bear, nor all the youthful product of the year, could bribe his choice. Yourself alone can prove a fit reward for so refined a love. Relent, fair nymph, and with a kind regret think 'tis Vertumnus weeping at your feet. A tale attend, though Cyprus known to prove how Venus once revenged neglected love. Iphis, of vulgar birth, by chance had viewed fair Anaxarete of Teucer's blood. Not long had he beheld the royal dame, ere the bright sparkle kindled into flame. Oft did he struggle with a just despair, unfixed to ask, unable to forbear. But love, who flatters still his own disease, hopes all things will succeed, he knows will please. Where'er the fair one haunts, he hovers there, and seeks her confident with sighs and prayer. or letters he conveys that seldom prove successless messengers in suits of love. Now, shivering at her gates, the wretch appears, and myrtle garlands on the column rears, wet with a deluge of unbidden tears. The nymph, more hard than rocks, more deft than seas, derides his prayers, insults his agonies, arraigns of insolence the aspiring swain, and takes a cruel pleasure in his pain. Resolved at last to finish his despair, he thus upbraids the inexorable fair. O anorexite, at last forget the license of a passion indiscreet. Now triumph, since a welcome sacrifice your slave prepares to offer to your eyes my life. Without reluctance I resign. That present best can please a pride like thine. But oh, forbear to blast a flame so bright, doomed never to expire but with the light. And you, great powers, do justice to my name. The hours you take from life, restore to fame. Then o'er the post once hung with wreaths, he throws the ready cord, and fits the fatal noose. For death prepares, and bounding from above at once, the wretch concludes his life and love. Ere long the people gather, and the dead is to his mourning mother's arms conveyed. First, like some ghastly statue she appears, then bathes the breathless corse in seas of tears, and gives it to the pile. Now, as the throng proceed in sad solemnity along, to view the passing pomp, the cruel fair hastes, and beholds her breathless lover there. Struck with the sight, inanimate she seems. Set are her eyes, and motionless her limbs, her features without fire, her colour gone, and like her heart she hardens into stone. In Salamis the statue still is seen, in the famed temple of the Cyprian queen. Warned by this tale, no longer then disdain, O nymph beloved, to ease a lover's pain. So may the frosts in spring your blossoms spare, and winds their rude autumnal rage forbear. The story oft Vertumnus urged in vain, but then assumed his heavenly form again. Such looks and lustre the bright youth adorn, as when with rays glad Phoebus paints the morn. The sight so warms the fair admiring maid, like snow she melts, so soon can youth persuade. Consent on eager winds succeeds desire, and both the lovers glow with mutual fire. Now Procus, yielding to the fates, his son mild Numitor succeeded to the crown, but false Amulius with a lawless power at length deposed his brother Numitor. Then Illa's valiant issue with the word, her parent re-enthroned the rightful lord. Next Romulus to people Rome contrives, the joyous time of Pales' feast arrives. He gives the word to seize the Sabine wives. The sires, enraged, take arms, by Tatius led, bold to revenge their violated bed. A fort there was, not yet unknown to fame, called the Tarpeian, its commander's name. This by the false Tarpeia was betrayed, but death well recompensed the treacherous maid. The foe on this new-bought success relies, and silent march the city to surprise. Saturnia's arts with Sabine arms combine, but Venus countermines the vain design, entreats the nymphs that o'er the springs preside, which near the fane of hoary Janus glide, to send their succours every urn they drain, to stop the Sabines' progress, but in vain. The Naiads now more stratagems essay, and kindling sulphur to each source convey. The floods ferment, hot exhalations rise, till from the scalding ford the army flies. Soon Romulus appears in shining arms, and to the war the Roman legions warms. The battle rages, and the field is spread with nothing but the dying and the dead. Both sides consent to treat without delay, and their two chiefs at once the sceptre sway. But Tedious by Lavinian fury slain, great Romulus continued long to reign. And warrior Mars his burnished helm puts on, and thus addresses heaven's imperial throne. Since the inferior world is now become one vassal globe and colony to Rome, this grace, O Jove, for Romulus I claim. Admit him to the skies from whence he came. Long hast thou promised an ethereal state to Mars's lineage, and thy word is fate. The sire that rules the thunder with a nod declared the fiat, and dismissed the god. Soon as the power army potent surveyed the flashing skies, the signal he obeyed, and leaning on his lance he mounts his car, his fiery coursers lashing through the air. Mount Palatine he gains and finds his son, good laws enacting on a peaceful throne, the scales of heavenly justice holding high, with steady hand and a discerning eye. Then vaults upon his car, and to the spheres, swift as a flying shaft, Rome's founder bears. The parts more pure in rising are refined, the gross and perishable lag behind. His shrine in purple vestments stands in view. He looks a god, and is Quirinus now. Ere long the goddess of the nuptial bed with pity moved sends Iris in her stead. To sad Hersilia thus the meteor maid, chaste relict in bright truth, to heaven allied. The Sabines' glory and the sex's pride, honored on earth, and worthy of the love of such a spouse as now resides above, some respite to thy killing griefs afford, and if thou wouldest once more behold thy lord, retire to yon steep mount with groves o'erspread, which with an awful gloom his temples shade. With fear the modest matron lifts her eyes, and to the bright ambassadress replies, O goddess, yet to mortal eyes unknown, but sure thy various charms confess thee one. O quick to Romulus thy votress bear, with looks of love he'll smile away my care. In whate'er orb he shines, my heaven is there. Then haste with Iris to the holy grove, and up the mountain Quirinal as they move. A lambent flame glides downward through the air, and brightens with a blaze Hercilia's hair. Together on the bounding ray they rise, and shoot a gleam of light along the skies. With opening arms Quirinus met his bride, now Aura named, and pressed her to his side.